Hey guys, how's it going? Mike Turpin here of Scourge of Iron. Today's podcast episode, we're going to be talking about dumbbells and barbells and how the body works to stabilize each. A lot of you have met that person at the gym that is starting to understand weightlifting. I don't know if he's really understanding it, but he's starting to get that maybe free weights have a benefit that machines don't offer. And he's that guy going around saying, I prefer free weights, I prefer dumbbells, I prefer barbells. And you ask him why. And you know what his answer is? He says, because it works accessory muscles. It works stabilizer muscles. That's the key word of the day, stabilizer. So it works stabilizer muscles. And you know this guy, you know what he was thinking. He's thinking there's about 100 to 1,000 little tiny muscles in his body that he incorporates by doing a one-arm dumbbell concentration curl that he doesn't incorporate by doing a machine. And you know, the guy is starting to get on the right path. He's starting to get it. But you know what the problem is? He's talked to somebody who is right, gives him information that is correct, and he doesn't understand it. He doesn't get the logic behind it. He hasn't done any critical thinking. He still doesn't understand the information, and he's regurgitating it, and it becomes the right answer with incorrect logic. And if there's anything, before we get to the episode, if there's anything I want people to do when they listen to my episodes is, I want them to think logically. I want them to think critically and not just have an answer, because sometimes you have the right answer, but if you don't understand the logic or the reasoning behind it, you don't really understand the answer. You can't teach it to somebody. You can't apply it to other situations. And you'll find out in weightlifting, the more critically you think, the easier it will be for you to come to your own conclusions about things you don't have the answers for. So you need to understand the answers you have to understand future answers and to come to future conclusions about anything. And it's just good to think critically and understand knowledge, so you're not that guy at the gym who's telling you that, you know, you need to point your toes out in the squat and point your knees out, and when you ask why, they don't know, or drive through your heels. Well, why? I don't know. Just because. Because that's what they say. Drive through your heels. That's better, right? Yeah, but do you understand why? Well, no. Well, okay, teach me. I want to learn. I want to know why. And that's the biggest problem. So there's a guy out there who had somebody tell him, hey, doing free weight movements works more stabilizer muscles, and there's thousands of stabilizer muscles in the body because, oh, of course there's hundreds of thousands of muscles in the body, blah, blah. They're just rattling off all this stuff as if he knows anything about what he's talking about. And then he'll just say, yeah, it's working stabilizer muscles, so I'm just going to get a lot bigger now, or whatever his goal is, or a lot stronger as a result. And those aren't incorrect. Those are not incorrect conclusions, but the logic is just really, oh my gosh, makes you want to rip your hair out sometimes. So, dear guy at the gym, today's episode is going to be going over how your body might stabilize a dumbbell and a barbell differently. Unfortunately for you, it might be a little bit advanced. This is not stabilization 101. We're not going to compare machines and free weight movements. This is for people who already get that, but might have trouble explaining the difference between a dumbbell and a barbell and how your body might stabilize the weight differently. And I'm not this is not the end all be all. This is not dumbbells versus barbells. What's better? No, this isn't anything like that. This is a lot of times when you have a hot topic or you have a timeless, endless debate, you know, you present logic and you make people think critically, which is what I want you to do. All right. Real quick, not to get too sidetracked. Here's a perfect example. Sometimes there are people who say toes out and knees go in the same direction in the squat. And those people have a logical explanation, okay? They have very intelligent reasoning, and they, you know, understand the anatomy, and they understand the muscle recruitment, and they understand what part of the foot you should be driving through, and they understand all of those things to squat with your toes open and knees in the same direction. And there are very intelligent people who say that. Now also there are very intelligent people who say toes forward, knees out in the squat. Very intelligent people who have very logical reasons for a different conclusion. Guess what? Both people are right. They have two logical conclusions. They present you the logic, and they are both right. What they're saying is correct. Not 100% of the time, but that can be the case for this scenario. There's a reason why Louis Simmons says toes forward, knees out in the squat, and talks about knee and hip torque. And there's a reason why someone else might say, or Mark Rippetoe might say, toes open, knees in the same direction, and, explains the knee joint and the hip socket, all those things. There are logical reasons to come to two different conclusions. Just this past episode, I talked about wearing a belt and not wearing a belt and how it might affect your weightlifting. And I gave a very specific scenario, and doesn't mean anything about wearing a belt and not wearing a belt. It doesn't mean that you need to not wear a belt. It doesn't mean that wearing belts are worse. And there could be somebody who could come up with reasons why wearing belts are better. And guess what? We both have, I think, pretty logical. I think I had a pretty logical episode, and they probably could make a pretty logical episode that makes me look like an idiot. Both of us could be logical. That's just how it works. Not all of these things are black and white. Not everything is literal. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Time for the episode. Woo. All right. Got a little feisty there. Got a little fired up. The barbell press. That is the movement we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing the barbell press and the dumbbell press. And what I mean by the press, if I ever just say the press, I'm talking about a shoulder press. I'm talking about a military press. I'm talking about a standing shoulder press. I'm talking about, you get the point. Everyone has a different word, a different name for it. Most weightlifters refer to it as the press. And then the bench press is the bench press. Or you can call it a military press. You can call it a strict standing shoulder press. All right, we get the point. You're going to be standing, not seated, and you're going to be pressing the bar from your shoulders to a lockout. And then we're going to be comparing it to a standing dumbbell shoulder press. Same thing. The pathway centered. It's always a straight line over the center of your foot. That is the plane of movement. That is the centered, balanced weight is always over the center of your foot in a free weight movement where you are standing 100% of the time. Well, just in case there's an exercise I don't know about, 99.99999% of the time. Center of the foot, 100% of the time. 1,000, 9 million% of the time. Okay, you get what I'm saying. Look, barbell stays over the center of your foot in the deadlift, the squat, the row, and the press. Okay. How do we do that in the press? Well, some people have problems. They get the weight out in front of them off the bat. This is not a form for the press. So real quick, head back, chest up. You move your body and your head to allow that bar to travel straight up in a straight plane over the center of your foot. So if you're somebody who's like, well, how am I supposed to press straight up? Because that's where my chin is, and that's where my nose is, and that's where my head is. And well, you just move it out of the way. You bend in the neck a little bit, and you'll find it. You'll figure it out. Watch somebody. Go on YouTube. You'll get it. Okay. So, if the weight travels in front of me, let's talk strictly barbell here. If the weight travels in front of your body in the barbell press, how do you stabilize it? What stabilizer muscles are you incorporating? Is it 1,000 little tiny muscles in your forearm? Is it 1,000 little tiny muscles in your biceps? What's going on there? Well, I'll tell you right now, a lot of it, not all of it, a lot of it is going to come from your torso. Okay? Here is what might happen. If the weight comes out in front of you ever so slightly, it creates what is called a motor arm. This is a little advanced for some of you. You might not be able to wrap your head around it. You might need a diagram. You might need a picture. You might need a 2x4 over the head. But look, this is how it works. Weight travels in front of the balanced area, and now it has leverage. It is now more weight. That's, not exactly the most articulate way, I know. But the barbell, imagine you are trying to pick something up. A barbell up, a deadlift. You guys are weightlifters. You guys know about picking up barbells. Let's say the weight is about 4 feet out in front of your body and you go to pick it up. Let's say it's 200 pounds. Now, what is it going to feel like? Maybe 275, maybe, 300, maybe 350. The further that weight is out in front of you, the more leverage it has, the longer the motor arm is, and the more weight it will end up being. It's the same literal weight that weighs more. That's one way you can explain it. And for those of you who need another example, imagine that the socket, imagine like a ratchet, a socket, or a wrench. Imagine the socket is the center of gravity, okay? It's the balanced plane in a weightlifting movement. And the further you get on the end of that ratchet, the more leverage that weight is. If I'm pushing 20 pounds of pressure to try and break a bolt, or break a nut or whatever, but let's say I'm breaking a bolt, and I am 6 inches away from the socket, and I press down 20 pounds, and it's like, dang it, I'm just not quite strong enough. What am I gonna do? Well, you inch up about another 6 inches, and now you're a foot away from that socket, and you press with that same exact 20 pounds, and you're like, ugh, not quite, but you think it's getting a little stronger. So what you do is you grab a pipe. You know that trick? You put a pipe on the end of the ratchet. Now you're 2 feet away from that socket, and you press down the same 20 pounds on the end of that pipe, and what happens? It breaks the bolt. It loosens the bolt. You're still applying 20 pounds of pressure, but you've created a longer motor arm, and you now have more leverage, and now you can break the bolt. Well, that's the same way free weight movements work. If you have a dumbbell and you're doing side lateral raises and you hold it with a straight arm, it's now going to feel heavier than if you have a bent elbow. Leg raises are more difficult than knee raises all of the time, but your legs still weigh the same. That is how it works. Okay, so let's get back. So the weight now travels out in front of your body, out in front of that middle of your foot, maybe about a half an inch to an inch. What happens? Now that weight, that motor arm is created, and that weight has more leverage on your body, so your body's going to work almost instinctually to get it back over the center of your foot. Well, what's going to happen? How's it going to do it? What muscles are you going to incorporate? And the answer is more than likely, like I said before, your torso. It could come from your hips. It could come from your glutes. You could tense up in your glutes, and it might bring the weight back more by flexing your glutes. You could kind of tighten up your abdomen. You can kind of like lean back a hair and then get the weight centered. Or you might come forward. You might shift forward. You might step forward. Regardless, it's going to probably come from below your shoulder girdle. Okay, that's a little bit of foreshadowing from when we go over the dumbbells. For those of you who are thinking ahead, that's probably what's going to happen. More than likely, you're going to flex your spinal erectors in your lower back. You're going to do something to pull that weight back over the center of balance. Keep in mind that weight is traveling from the bar all the way to the feet. So that energy is traveling, and that weight is traveling through your body. And any bit of movement that starts, at the top is probably going to go down to the end. So if you shift your torso forward, that means your legs are going to tighten up to get that back in balance, because if your torso comes forward, then you need something to pull that back, and et cetera, et cetera. If your feet stay planted, your whole entire body is going to be working anytime that weight gets out of balance and you need to pull it back. Unless you, of course, step, and then that's a different story. That's how it works. And sometimes it's just a millimeter of movement, and, your body will work to stabilize it. Or if you're just somebody who is pressing on an incorrect plane, eventually once you get to heavy enough weight, you won't be able to do that. But somebody who can, press 225 could press 135 a foot out in front of them. It could happen. Okay. That 135 may feel a lot more like 185 or 200 pounds, but you're good for 225. You can do it. You can. Very rarely do you get a lifter who will do that because they can feel the difference. But every once in a while, you get somebody with lightweight who will swing that weight out in front of themselves, and then it comes back at the top with the barbell, because it is difficult to try and keep that bar in a straight plane. And it will get out of line. It does happen if you watch it from side view. The barbell will not travel exactly straight up, unless you are an extremely advanced lifter. Okay. I hope you all, does everybody understand? Any questions? Any questions out there? Does anybody understand what I'm saying about how your torso and your thighs and your glutes and your hips and your spinal erectors all work to stabilize the weight? That one single entity? Oh, that's more foreshadowing. Let's move on to dumbbells. Okay, so you're in a dumbbell press and the weight gets out in front of you on the left side about an inch. What are you going to do? What's going to happen? Are you gonna bring your spinal erectors nice and tight and kind of bring your chest up to kind of pull that weight back a hair? What? No? Somebody at home? No? Why is that? Oh, because there's a right dumbbell and it's not connected to the left dumbbell. Darn it. Your torso whatever force you generate in your torso is only going to go to that left dumbbell at 50%. Only 50% of the force you generate is going to go to that left dumbbell, approximately 50%, but you get what I'm saying. So if I was to throw my weight back, my body back to stabilize that weight, now it affects the right dumbbell, which was now previously stabilized, but now that thing just went back behind your head because you threw your torso back. So does that make sense? When you move your torso, it affects both dumbbells separately. It's not together. So both wrists controlling that weight, it's going to affect them separately. Now, when you move your left dumbbell, it does not move your right dumbbell. Or if you move your left hand, it does not move your right hand. They do not move laterally, anteriorly, regardless. They don't move together. Left to right, to front, to back. They are not moving together. And what that means is your body is going to work differently to stabilize it. And you know where that recruitment's going to come in? In the shoulder girdle. Because that left shoulder girdle, guess what it does? 100% carries the weight of that left dumbbell. Your left shoulder girdle is not controlling that right dumbbell at all. It's not, your left shoulder girdle is not controlling that right wrist, that right hand. So what happens is, if that weight comes out in front of you ever so slightly, maybe your rotator cuff muscles, maybe, or, tendons, like whatever it is, pressing, the muscles in your shoulder girdle are going to engage and fire to try and center that weight. More than likely, it's going to be in the shoulder girdle because 100% of the shoulder girdle recruitment controls that individual arm, that individual hand and dumbbell. So what winds up happening is if I'm pressing two dumbbells up, my left one comes forward just a hair and my right one comes back just a hair. You can literally do this right now. Bring your hands up as if you were doing a dumbbell shoulder press. Bring your left hand forward a hair and bring your right hand back a hair. How do you bring the weight back to center? You rotate in the shoulder girdle. You do, like almost like a rotator cuff, warm up. You literally rotate in the shoulder girdle and push your hand back on the left side and bring your palm forward on the right side. And it all comes in the shoulder girdle. Not 100% of the stabilization, but now you're going to be individually controlling those dumbbells with that said shoulder girdle because it is in 100% control, whereas your torso is only in 50% control of each side, and everything your torso does also directly affects the other dumbbell. Little bit of food for thought, guys. Couple of quick things. Obviously your torso still works when you are doing a dumbbell press. Obviously, it has an effect on it. You will stay nice and tight and you will try and keep that weight centered with your torso. It does happen. I'm just saying that it is going to be involved a lot less. For those of you who have done barbell presses, you are going to feel your abdominal muscles, your lower back, even your glutes and hips, depending on the person, but your abdominal muscles are really going to stay nice and tight and you're going to feel them work and engage anytime that weight kind of gets a little wobbly, a little shaky and is not in a straight line. That is what happens. And in a dumbbell, you're going to feel that energy a little bit less in your torso. You're going to feel that force a little bit less in your torso. And that's just the way that it is. Does that mean barbells are better? No. It doesn't mean that. It's not a better, it's not a worse thing. And there are other factors. And this, again, if people are like, oh, well, why isn't he talking about how you can change the pathway of a dumbbell and it doesn't need, and the distance of your hands can change. So you can come up and then bring your hands closer together at the top of the shoulder. You're right, you can. And there are other factors involved in dumbbell movements, that will engage different muscles and change the pathway as opposed to a bar. Your hands are going to be a fixed distance apart from each other. And how that affects, but that's not what this episode is about. I just was thinking about it the other day. I was actually typing in, I was curious what other people had to say about barbell and dumbbell stabilization and what their takes on the difference between barbells and dumbbells were. And it was something I had never really seen. A lot of people know, especially people who have injury, by doing dumbbell presses, you can kind of control the pathway. And yeah, you can maybe keep it in a more comfortable area than you can typically with a bar. That's something that has been argued for a long time. And it's more popular. I'm sure my stance has been argued for a long time, but it's not one that a lot of people know. So it's something to think about. The way the weight is controlled in the dumbbell and the barbell press and how your body works. And I was reading all these things and they're just saying it's like, well, this incorporates more, stabilizer muscles. Well, like what? How? What does that even mean? Like, can you explain? Can you explain a little bit? And at the end of the day, I would argue, if you want to know my opinion, I think it's just the dumbbell and the barbell are just extremely different, and how your body works to stabilize them is just 100% different. Not better, not worse. The dumbbells, which one requires more stabilization? I'm not gonna, maybe the dumbbells do, but do they incorporate more muscles? I don't know. It's not, don't worry about that part of it. They're just completely different. When you actually get down to it, they are 100% different. So guy at home, who wishes I was going to talk about, doing a bench press where you bring the dumbbells together at the top as opposed to doing a bar. But where you find somebody else who talks about that, Google that one. That's the one you see when you type into Google dumbbells versus barbell. So go type in dumbbell versus barbell and read the first 5 pages of Google results over the next course of, the next day or two, and you will have more than enough information than you need to about the questions you might have that I didn't answer. So hopefully, whether you agree, whether you disagree, you guys thought a little bit critically and it made you think. Remember, at the end of the episode, I am now reminding you, my goal was not to tell you what was better, but make you think critically. Maybe you're like, Mike, you know what? I don't think I agree, because when I'm doing a dumbbell press, I know for a fact that I engage my abdomen and it pulls that weight back and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's great. But I made you think, and I made you, whether you're agreeing or disagreeing, you are thinking critically, and that is it. You are not saying dumbbells are better. You are telling me why. All right, guys, talk to you soon.